Even Chris Cillizza, remember him, thinks Dems are dumb to fight Doge, which I definitely agree with. Chris Cillizza used to be on CNN. Now that he's no longer on CNN, he seems to be speaking truth, and he's right. They're dumb because the Democrats are on the wrong side of this issue because the majority of Americans. I mean, I've talked to liberals that even want government fraud and waste taken care of, and they believe in Doge and what Doge is doing. So it seems like the Democrats are on the wrong side of every single issue. These 80-20 issues. I'm talking about the issues where the majority of Americans agree on, the Democrats are against just to be anti-Trump. They're doing this just to be anti-Trump, but they're doing it to their own detriment. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to play the clip and hear what Chris Cillizza has to say about it. But before we get started, go ahead and hit that like button. Share this out so we can get this information out there. Subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and hit that alarm bell so you know when I'm putting out new stuff. Also, check out my link tree in the description. It has a link to my Patreon. That's where I talk about things that I can't talk about here. There's also a link to my Instagram and my X account, so follow me there as well. All right, so let's get into this news. Now, this comes from Newsbusters, and they report that having been laid off in December 2022 from CNN, Chris Cillizza has been free to appear elsewhere, join Stack, and come to his senses. That seems to have been the case more recently, with one example having come Wednesday night on News Nation, as he admitted he was exacerbated at Democrats being willing to die on the hill of saving the federal bureaucracy from Elon Musk. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're crazy because most Americans are against it. Most Americans are for it. Most Americans are for Doge going and getting rid of the fraud and the waste because this is essentially our money. Our money is going to crazy stuff. It's going to these NGOs. It's going to these things that most Americans disagree with. So let's get to the clip here. Hold on. Before I get to the clip, On Balance host Leland Vitert set the table in his Why It Matters memo with the admission that Democrats are fighting, literally dying on the hill of saving three-letter agencies that everybody in America hates, even though nobody outside of Washington wants business as usual in Congress, and certainly not that saving federal jobs is the civil rights movement. That's true. Since when is saving federal jobs a civil rights issue? But let's get to the clip. Let's hear it from him himself. Here we go.
Is this a winning strategy?
No. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
No.
It's been great, Chris. Appreciate it. You were good.
No. I think that, look, you played Jamie Raskin earlier. He represents, just outside of D.C., Montgomery County in Maryland. Fine. There's a lot of federal workers who live there. That's
right.
Fine for him, although that chant probably needs work. But the average person who doesn't live in and around Washington has no idea what these things are and why you wouldn't want to cut some of the waste from them. And so, no, again, you and I have talked about this on air and off air, and I think it's really important because I think it's a fundamental fact of how Democrats are positioning themselves, whether intentionally or unintentionally. They just have a blind spot with Trump. No idea he proposes can be even.
Yeah, and that's the TDS, the Trump derangement syndrome. They can't help themselves but to be against everything that Trump is for, just because Trump is for it. And that is a losing strategy, because what Trump has been proposing lately, the majority of Americans agree with.
Even a good idea. Again, if it was proposed by James P. Public, Republican president, they'd be like, okay, well, maybe. But because it is him, and because the loathing is so, and it is, I use that word advisedly, but they hate him.
Right.
Yeah. Every idea is a bad idea, and I just think it leads to some poor strategic conclusions if your goal is, as Democrats' goal should be, getting some power back because they're out of power at every single level at the state and federal government.
I don't know why. I just find it sort of funny to watch.
Well,
I mean, the sort of political malpractice by either side is kind of, I don't want to say hilarious, but as political observers, there's like a funny to it.
But at like
entertaining.
some level, I sort of get it. Like they're looking for something, right? I think the reality situation is they don't have power. They don't have the White House, the Senate, or the House, and they don't really have any obvious leadership, which means they don't have a message.
What's interesting is that sort of this breaking of people to do what is in their own worst interest, right, is something Trump does. And then this occurred to me when watching the coverage of it, because as journalists, I was trained as a journalist. You came out here, worked for George Will, the Washington Post. Government waste is the easiest pickings as a journalist. It's what you go after.
Yeah, that's true. It's easy pickings. Everyone is against government waste, except for when you put when you have Trump saying he's against it and wanting to do something about it. That's when Democrats are in an uproar about it, which is just crazy. He continued to dish out the truth, something we saw little of at CNN. So let's get to the clip here.
New York Times Daily did this whole episode today, that's their morning podcast, about how, the purge is hurting all of these federal workers. And there's not been one critical question of asking, I think, Democrats, like, do we really need all of these programs that you're now championing?
I think that if it was even Chris Cillizza or Leland Vittert president, God forbid, that'd be terrifying, especially me. You, I could live with. If we had that and they said, you know what, the federal bureaucracy is too big, it doesn't work well, everybody knows this, it's outdated, it's not technologically brought, I think you would get 90% approval. People like, yeah, like the whole limestone mine where they store the records. Elon Musk talked about this. My friend and colleague David Fahrenthold wrote about this in 2015 or 2016 when he was at the Washington Post. He's at the New York Times now. Like, yes, anyone who reads that is like, wait, we're keeping these paper files in a limestone mine underground in Pennsylvania? Like, that doesn't feel 2025. So, like, that to me is the issue.
It's all about Trump.
The Democratic blind spot for Trump has cost them significantly. If you talk to any Democrat before the election, they're like, we're going to win. Like, we'll win the House. Well, you're now, elections have consequences. You are now out of power in all of these places. And it seems to me what you should do when that happens is say, we screwed up. So what went wrong, right? If God forbid, there's ever low ratings on this show.
But they're never asking their question. They're never asking what went wrong. And you see people like Jasmine Crockett coming out and saying, people are just aren't educated on us, on what we want to do to help them. So she's saying, it's the dumb Americans' fault. It's not our messaging. It's not what we've done. It's not our policies. It's just they're just not educated enough. And that's how the majority of the left feel. They just feel like everyone else is just dumb and uneducated. That's the reason why they're not voting Democrat. That's the reason why Trump swept the swing states. That's the reason why Republicans hold the Senate and the House, is because people are just not educated enough on how much they really care for the downtrodden and the American people. And that's laughable. And if they continue to push that message, they're gonna lose again in 2 years when we have elections again.
Which I assume there never will be. If there were, you'd be like, okay, well, what can we do to do better? Like all of us would do. More Cillizza is the answer. But the point is, like, everybody does that. If you lose a game, you go back and examine what did we do wrong. Okay, you don't say, we did everything right. It's the voters' fault.
Facts. They still blame, but that's the thing. They're blaming the voters. They're blaming the voters. You're not educated enough, voters. Y'all are too dumb. But let them keep pushing that. That's their message. Let them keep pushing that message and see how far that takes them. But y'all let me know what y'all think about this. Leave your comments down below. Like, share, and subscribe. And check out jjthepsychotherapist.com for the latest in news. Until next time. Peace.